Welcome to this brief presentation on the Intel Android Emulator Accelerator and some things that can go wrong when you try to use it with Android Studio. Here I've run the typical Hello World Android script, and we can see that as we prefer, HAXM is working and is running in fast virtual mode, and that's as good as it gets. But what if it's not that way? What if there's some other problems? Well, let's take a look. Well, let's suppose instead things don't go well and I get an error message like this, which says that HAXM is not properly installed or is not usable. How do I handle this situation? Well, the first thing I want to do is to get to the SDK tools. To do that, I want to go up to here or go through the tools menu and find the SDK tools. So here we find ourselves in the Android SDK tools, the SDK tools folder tab. We want to look for this Intel x86 accelerator. We want to make sure that this is checked so that it is in fact installed or going to be installed when we hit apply. We also want to copy this address because this is where our SDK is stored, and the accelerator that's going to be installed will be installed underneath this. We have to put this address into a file manager and drill down to that location to manually start the installer. Once we drill down to the SDK directory, we actually need to go a couple levels deeper. So go down to Extras, Intel, Hardware Accelerated Execution Manager, and here you will find the installer which we have previously installed. We want to be able to double click this, which will start the installer process itself. On the initial installer screen, we simply press Next. This brings us to the most important screen in this installer, and that is the default value of 1024 megabytes that's set for this accelerator to use. It turns out that most of the Android emulations use 1536 megabytes instead of 1024. You can save yourself some grief right now by setting this to manual and changing this to 1536. But let's assume for a second that you didn't know that and you went ahead and accepted the default. The next two screens will show you what would happen. This is simply a confirmation screen saying that in fact we are using 1024 megabytes of system memory. So let's go ahead and just do install. So we go back and we run our application again. This time we get a different error. Although HAXM is there installed, it's not working properly because the RAM sizes, as we mentioned earlier for the emulation, is 1536, and we only provided 1024 in the accelerator installer. To fix that, we need to go over to our AVD definitions screen. This screen will show us the device emulations that we have defined. This is the edit button, so press that for the device that you want to adjust. On this first screen, simply take the defaults and go down and press the button that says Show Advanced Settings. In the first part of this screen, the first thing we want to check for is to make sure that we have the front and back camera set for no memory allocation. Unless you're actually running a simulation that uses the cameras, having these set to values simply slows down the startup time for the emulator. Then we want to scroll down to the bottom of the page. This screen then shows us what our basic problem is with the last error. The Android emulation requires 1536 megabytes in order to work properly. But remember, the accelerator defaulted to 1024 megabytes. We actually have two choices here. One is to change this to 1024 and select Finish, which will work but will not be as effective as it will be if we leave this at 1536 and go back and rerun the installer for the accelerator and change its value this time to 1536 to match. Now we go back to our main screen and we rerun our application again. This time all is right with the world. HAXM is working and running in fast virtual mode. Again, it will work faster if we set both of those RAM settings to 1533 than it will if we set both of them to 1024. Thank you very much for attending this brief presentation. I hope it saves someone some time and effort.